Hey, welcome to episode number 91 of the Brave Widow Show. I'm excited for you to hear from a special guest today, Andrea Rivera. Andrea was at the age of 20 and 24 when she became widowed, not only once at the age of 20, but again at the age of 24. It is incredible to think about her spirit of resilience and what she has been able to overcome in the years since she's been widowed, and at the same time, being pregnant during her first loss and raising small children during her second loss. Andrea has a beautiful spirit and presence, and I think you are going to enjoy the insight and the advice that she has to share with other young widows who are trying to raise children and grieve at the same time. Before we dive into Andrea's story, I do want to make you aware of a special group that we have going on. If you're watching this on video, or sorry, if you're not watching this on video, I'm holding up the Grief Recovery Handbook. And I have talked about this book many times on the podcast, probably not enough. I probably need to talk about it more. But this grief recovery method program was really the final puzzle piece for me in feeling a sense of completeness in my relationship with Nathan and with my grief. Even though I had done a lot of work with coaching and counseling and learning and being certified and doing all of the things that we think are the right steps in healing and moving through grief, I still had this sense of guilt, of regret, and ultimately a lot of unclosed loops, a lot of things that were just unsaid, unresolved, a yearning to be able to have one more conversation and talk about some of those things. And this program completely changed my grief recovery and helped me feel a sense of completeness. It helped me feel free from regret, from guilt, from just that yearning of wanting to resolve some of these things. So I became certified to be able to host sessions for other people and work them through the program because it's very prescriptive. It is an evidence-based program, the only one in the world. And evidence-based just means that it has been proven to help people with grief recovery. Because it's prescriptive, it is something completely separate and apart from Brave Widow. So if you're part of the Brave Widow community, you're not going to find it in there. And on the other hand, if you're not a widow, or if you want to address another loss, or you have a friend that's struggling with loss and with grief, the good news is they can go through this program, and I would love for you to bring them to the program. If you're interested in joining the wait list or learning more, or if you know you've heard me talk about this enough, maybe you've read the book or parts of the book, and you know you're ready to go through this 8-week program, then you can go to bravewidow.com/grief to join. So bravewidow.com/GRIEF to join the wait list or to go ahead and sign up for the group. Now, I lead online groups or cohorts, as they're called, of a maximum of 8 people at a time. So I'm recording this in February. My next cohort that I'm leading is starting on April 29th. I don't know when you're going to be listening to this, but either way, I will always keep up bravewidow.com/grief as a way that you can go to get on the wait list or join the next available cohort. And again, this book actually covers many, many losses, 30 to 40 different life event losses. This is not just for someone who's lost a loved one. It's not just for people who are widowed. It covers a variety of things. And I have found it personally incredibly helpful to go through the program and feel a sense of completeness. It's an online program that we do through Zoom. It's 8 weeks. I cover the book and any supplies that you need for that. And really, it just requires a commitment that you show up, that you do the reading and the writing exercises and that you're willing to participate in your own grief recovery. But I cannot recommend this enough. It's an absolutely amazing program that I am honored to be a part of. So again, that's bravewidow.com/grief. If you want to learn more, you want to get on the wait list, or you are ready. You are ready to take action and join the next cohort. All right, let's dive into Andrea's story. Welcome to the Brave Widow Show, where we help widows find hope, heal their heart, and dream again for the future. I'm your host, Emily Tanner. After losing my husband of 20 years, I didn't know how I could ever experience true joy and excitement again for the future. I eventually learned how to create a life I love, and I've made it my mission to help other widows do the same. Join me in the Brave Widow membership community and get started today. Learn more at bravewidow.com. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Brave Widow Show. Today, I have a special guest, Andrea Rivera, and she's going to share her story with us. And I think you're really going to appreciate the insight and perspective that she has to share. So, Andrea, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Andrea, being a young widow is a unique circumstance, but you have what some might consider an even more unique circumstance. Would you mind to share with us a little bit about what that is?
Yes, absolutely. So 2005, met and fell in love with my son's father, and got pregnant. And in May of 2006, actually May 16th of 2006, he actually passed away, which was 2 weeks and 2 days before Caden was born. I was very, very young at that point. I was about 20. I was 20 years old, and it just felt very surreal. And then
And I'm sure that had to be really hard being pregnant, knowing that you're going to deliver a baby, and there's maybe some mixed emotions there, but I imagine you're excited as the due date's getting closer, and then having to
right.
go through that experience had to be really hard.
Yeah, I remember looking at my 9-month belly and just saying, like, to myself, I really don't have the time to grieve right now the way I want to, because I need to take care of my baby. Like, I don't want my baby to have a sad mom. I don't want my baby to grow up with a broken mom. So I just kind of like, hey, you know what? We're plowing through. And I just kind of put that on the back burner, I guess, for a while. And then fast forward to 2007, I married my daughter's father, and about not even 2 years later, he also passed away. My daughter was 1.5 years, and I remember just thinking, I can't believe that this is happening again. I remember when I was by him in the ICU, by his bedside, and just kind of numb and looking at him and thinking, I'm like, well, God wouldn't do this again to me, like, kind of thing. And yeah, sure enough, November 23rd, 2009. And I remember walking out of the hospital, and I just stood in the middle of the parking lot. It was after midnight, and I just screamed. And then I walked to my car, and I don't know what happened after that. Honestly, I just numb and just, going through the motions.
So do you mind sharing what happened and how your husband had ended up in ICU?
Yeah, absolutely. He was feeling ill for a couple months, and he would go to the doctors, and nothing, they couldn't find anything wrong with him. And then one day I looked at him and I said, Steve, you're yellow. Like when someone says someone is jaundiced, like everything is yellow. Yes, his eyes, his skin, he was like a glowworm. And they said, Steve, you need to go to the doctor, actually, probably to the hospital at this point. At that point, I was working as a CNA, so I was kind of versed in, you know, in healthcare, and knowing that his liver was literally failing him. You can see it. And he refused. And then I want to say a day or two later, he actually had to have the ambulance called and taken away. And that was on a Friday, and he was gone by Sunday. Like it was just he turned septic, and it just went from there.
I can't I can't even hardly imagine what it had to be like. Here you've got two very young, small children at this point. You yourself are still really young, and you're faced with, your husband's in ICU. Maybe there's a point where you think he's going to make it, he's not going to make it. I can't believe this is happening to me. How did you even find a courage to try to move forward or to think that a life for you would ever be possible past that point? I mean, that had to be devastating.
Oh, it definitely was. I honestly don't know what thoughts exactly I had in my mind at that time, just knowing that I had to pick up the pieces and, you know, do it all for the kids. I That's just what I had to do. Um, I didn't have that time to grieve. I did on my own time and never allowed the kids to see myself grieving, which may or may not have been a good thing. I don't know. But that's what I did. That's how I, coped with it. I kept really busy with them and with work, and that's really what I did for myself.
And did you have a lot of support of people around you, maybe family or friends that stepped in to help? Or did you feel like you were somewhat alone in just trying to survive after that?
I want to say a little bit of both. I didn't feel very supported, but I feel like also that might have been my fault as well, because people tend to look at me as a very strong person and maybe not needing that because I don't ask for it, and I don't come off as me needing it. So they probably thought, well, she's fine, like it's okay. So in that way, not really. And I feel
Yeah.
bad saying that though too, but I mean, when I look back at it, I'm like, man, I really didn't have much, many at all. So
Yeah. Well, I'm working with a group of folks through the grief recovery method, and they have a concept that's called the Academy Award recovery, which is exactly that, right? Like we have our acting face, our game face on,
yeah,
and I'm smiling as you're talking because I resonate a lot with that, which is I'm fine, everything's fine, I've got it, because you feel like you have to be strong and you have to be there and you have
mhm,
to, like, you should be able to do it all. You
right,
shouldn't have to ask for help, is how I felt anyway.
right. And I also hate when people feel sorry for me. I don't ever want to feel like that, and I know that maybe that's a prideful thing, but I don't like that. It
Mm.
just doesn't feel good. So,
Yeah, I completely understand. And at the same time, I think, my kids were older when I lost my husband, and I'm thinking about you maybe having to potty train and change diapers, or, kids when they're that young. What, your son was probably around 3 or so.
yeah, he was three, just three. My daughter was a year and a half. Yeah,
Yeah, so a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, they're very needy.
yeah,
They can't necessarily go fix their own snacks or pour their own drinks, or, they need a lot of mom time and support. And
Mhm.
were there times that you just felt like, you never got to shut off. You never got a break. Like you were just always had to be present, whether it was at work or with the kids, or did you find that was a struggle for you?
It definitely was. I definitely had my moments with that, like coming home and when I finally would get him to bed and I was sitting on the couch, I'm like, oh my gosh, and just thinking like, gotta do it again in, 7 hours or whatever it is, and just not really feeling like a relief, I guess. A lot
Mhm.
of the jobs I took though when the kids were young, like I was a daycare teacher, so I could be in the daycare with the kids, or a lunch lady, so I could see them during the day. Like that's what I did. I just did what I had to do to, spend my time with them, but also make the money that we needed to survive. So,
Oh, that's a great idea. I was gonna ask, what suggestions you had for someone who's in a very similar situation to you, who maybe just lost their spouse or their second spouse, and they've got these young kids and they're trying to figure out what to even do next. What else were maybe some things that helped you during that time?
being outside, the fresh air, the sun, journaling, lots of Epsom salt baths. Love my baths. Was never really alone then, though, with the door open and then, mom, what are you doing? But I mean, it, yeah,
Fingers
that could,
under the
yes.
door.
Oh, like I never, no, that's the thing. Like, I always kept the door open, bathroom door open, because it never fails. Every time you go, hey, mom, what are you doing? Hey, you want to see this? Like just, it's like, okay. At this point, just everyone, we're partying in the bathroom when I go. So come on in.
Oh, exactly. Well, those are really some great suggestions. And I like the way that you look at it as you're trying to carve out at least a little time for yourself. And you're also trying to structure your life in a way where you can still be present at times with your kids, whether you're working in daycare or as the lunch lady and you get to see them during the day. I think that was a really creative solution that, a lot of people have that fog and haze when they're first in grief and it's hard to think clearly, but that was a really creative solution that you put in place.
Oh, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So, if you can remember, back then, what what was maybe a point where you felt like you were getting your feet underneath you and you could start to think about rebuilding your life, or feeling that there could still be a good future for you and your family? What was that experience like for you?
I don't necessarily think it was any particular moment. I feel though throughout the years, every year has gotten better emotionally and financially for me and for me and the kids. And my kids have even said that too. Like we've moved several times, unfortunately, but it's always been to like a better location, a better home, better school, and we've been able to, travel a little bit. So never one particular moment. It was always just doing better. Like one more step. Let's keep going. Just keep trucking and just kind of let it fall where it's going to be. But it's always for the best.
Oh, I think that's great. A lot of people tend to struggle with not having any hope at all or feeling like, well, what's the point? My person's no longer here. But I love
Yeah.
that you took those steps out of faith, like, okay, somehow we're going to create this life again. And I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I know if I just keep moving forward, that we're going to eventually get there.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. So I know everybody will be curious to know, having lost two people that you were so close to, did that impact, did that give you a sense of fear in any way? Like, I don't want another relationship, or, maybe there's a reason why this keeps happening to me, or did you have any of that mind drama or any of those
Oh
thoughts
my
as
gosh.
you,
Yes.
okay, all right, tell us about that.
Yes. That was always a fear and it still is a fear. And honestly, that fear has kind of seeped into me thinking about my kids too. Like, oh my gosh, what if something happens to them? I really try my best to not dwell on that on a daily, but I do think about that daily. I do. But I think that's just part of my grieving process. Like, because we've lost so much at in such a short, amount of time. And while they're so young, now that I'm older, they're older, I'm actually able to process the grief that I didn't process before too.
Mm, yeah, I think
Because I didn't allow myself to do that fully. Because I had kids to raise, and that was I know that's not for everyone, but that was my mentality. I was like, I can't do this right now. I have my babies, and this is what we have to do. But now that they're older and they're starting to have their own lives, my daughter's almost 16, my son's almost 18. Now I have more time where I'm like, okay, because mom, I'm going to a friend's house, or mom, I have to work. And now I can sit and process that grief the way that it should have been years ago, too.
thank you for that just vulnerability, because I think a lot of people don't realize that it has to be processed at some point, and they think, well, time just magically heals all wounds. Time will
Yeah.
just make it better on its own. But as you said, we find that we have to come back to it, feel it, process it, and then move forward. It never time just makes more of what is. Time doesn't just magically heal a wound or fix things. And it sounds like you're having some time now to process that, which I think really is great.
hmm Yeah. Time is definitely it's almost like a reflection back of all the time that you've lost. I feel like, oh, he should have been here for that. And just it's every like, because my son's going to graduate this year. So I think back, I'm like, oh, you're missing, graduation, like, I know you're here, but it's kind of like a bittersweet. It's bittersweet. That's what it is. The
Yeah.
time loss is bittersweet.
Yeah, it is. And it's the loss of, the dreams and the goals and those milestones where we think, oh, their dad should have been here and should be able to
hmm
see this. And that can that can be really hard.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And there are some times where, I think it was more so when the kids were younger that I would sit at their, Christmas carol or whatever they were doing at the time, or reward show, and just like, a little tear would just, stream down, just thinking of like, you should be here. I know you are, but it would just be nice, just being proud with me physically, I guess.
Yeah, it's just different. It
Yeah.
is it is very different. So as you're being a solo parent and you're raising these kiddos who are very soon gonna be adults, which is
hmm
probably feels a little bit crazy.
yeah.
What advice or suggestions do you have for, other widows that are raising kids? And looking back, is there anything you would have done differently or that you think might have helped you or you wish someone would have told you about raising kids and having this experience?
I would have asked for help, or at least time to cry, or for a hug, something. I think that would have really helped. It's okay to ask for help. Like, you can be a very prideful person and still ask for help. That's okay. And everyone grieves differently and on their own time. But it's okay to ask for help at any time.
And what would you tell someone, let's say they want to help like they have a friend that's widowed and they want to help, but they don't know how, they don't know what to do, they don't want to overstep, or maybe that person is like you and they're like, "I'm strong, I got this, I'm fine." Um, what advice would you give the friend or the support person to say, look, even if they say they're strong and they're fine, here are some things that maybe you could do, or
Mhm.
maybe just don't give up asking. What would you say to that person?
Um, I would say, at first, when it first initially happens, I feel like everyone is, oh, let's help, let's help, let's help. but check on that person, 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road, not just initially. Because, after the funeral is done, people kind of, people go on with their own lives, and that's no fault to them. It's their life. But then you start to feel forgotten. So for those people that want to help out their friends, I feel like, yes, be with them, obviously from the get-go when it happens, but continue to check in on them. It doesn't have to be like overbearing or anything. My cousin actually, unfortunately, lost her husband to suicide about a year ago, and her mom actually had inboxed me and told me about it. And so, every so often I'll just be like, I'll message her, hey, hope you and the kids are doing well. It doesn't have to be a question. It can just be thinking of you, love you. And that's that. That makes people feel less alone. And initially, though, I feel like meals, especially if there's young children, if the person wants to, cook a meal and just drop it off, or a gift card to, Subway or whatever it is, um, and not necessarily have to see the person, but just be like, hey, I left something in your mailbox for you, or hey, I left something on your doorstep for you. So it's not like intrusive. It's like, but hey, like I care. And when you're ready, we can sit and talk if you want.
That's great. I think of people that supported me and still do. I kind of feel like they adopted me, maybe, like
Love that.
they adopted me as a widow and they, constantly send messages like, you don't need to respond, but just know that I'm thinking about you. Or they religiously send cards on birthdays and anniversaries and big days. And to your point, some of these people I haven't sat down with and had lengthy conversations, but it's just a really good feeling to know that you're not forgotten, that
Hmm.
you're not unseen, that people do care about you and want to be there for you, and that it just stands the test of time. That's really amazing.
Right.
Yeah, so any other words of advice or encouragement maybe for a widow that's just in the aftermath of loss and trying to figure it out, what final advice would you give to that person?
Final advice. I would say give yourself grace. Like I said before, grieving is a process, or grief is a process, and it comes in waves, and sometimes those waves knock you down, and that's okay. And sometimes there's no waves, and that's okay too. That doesn't mean that you don't feel less for that person that has, your husband or whomever has lost, that you've lost. And just self-care, as much as you probably do not want to do it, take 5 minutes out of your day to do something for yourself, even if it is to wash your face or to put deodorant on that day, whatever, how small it is, just do something for yourself.
Excellent advice. I love that. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for coming on the show today and being willing to share your story and encouragement for other widows. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. It's incredible to think about trying to cope and survive and thrive with two almost back to back losses at the age of 20 and 24 while raising small children. What an incredible spirit of resilience Andrea has. And I'm so proud of where she's come in that amount of time. Now, one of the things that she mentioned that I want to talk to you about and make sure that you're aware of is that even now, 15 years later, she's finding that she has to go back and process grief that she never processed when both of her persons died. And the reality is, people say time heals all wounds, and people say, oh, in time it gets better. But time does not magically fix those things. Time only makes more of what is. So if you're not processing, if you're not healing, if you're not working on those things, time's not going to compound that. time is only going to compound what you continue to do. I thought that the timing for this was incredible because I'm actually leading a cohort or a group of people through the grief recovery method program now. And I have another session starting on April 29th. I would absolutely love for you to be part of that. It's an amazing opportunity to process your grief, to let go of the guilt and the regret and the missed time that you have with your person that Andrea mentioned. And for me, it was the key, like the final puzzle piece in being able to feel free of guilt, of regret, of all the things I wish I would have been able to say to Nathan, of all those unclosed loops and unresolved emotional things that were happening inside of me. This program helped me to feel a sense of completeness and closure, which I had not been able to do for a significant amount of time. So I have the grief recovery handbook here. I've talked about it many times on the podcast. I cannot recommend it enough. It's an amazing book. The program is even more amazing, which is why I'm starting to teach it. Now, because the grief recovery program is evidence based, meaning that it's been proven to help people through grief to move forward with a sense of completeness, it is the only one in the entire world that's evidence-based. So because of the structure and because it's so prescriptive, this is something I offer outside of the Brave Widow community. Now, if you're in the Brave Widow community, you can still participate, but you do not need to be a widow. You do not need to be in Brave Widow community. You do not need to even have lost a loved one to participate in the grief recovery program. It is a program for anyone of any kind of loss, pet loss, job loss, health loss, financial loss, any sort of loss or grief. Anyone can participate. So if you're interested or you know someone who would be interested, I would love for them to join us as we walk through this program. There are only 8 spots available. And I don't know, because I'm recording this in February, when you're going to hear this. I don't know when we're going to continue to have spots available or how many will be left. But for the online group sessions, we are limited to 8 people per cohort or per group. And if you would love to be a part of that, or if the spots have been filled and you want to be on the wait list to participate in the next cohort, then you can go to bravewidow.com/grief, GRIEF, and sign up to be on the wait list, or go ahead and join to participate in one of the cohorts. It's an 8-week session program. I provide the book, I provide everything that you need to go through the program. And it really just requires a commitment from you that you are going to show up to the meetings and that you are going to participate in the reading and writing activities. Again, I cannot say enough how much this program has helped me, and I would love for it to help you too. Whether you find yourself just having had a recent loss, or whether maybe you're like Andrea and 15 years later, you're still processing your grief. You're still struggling. You're still having those really tough feelings in some of those big events, then this is the program for you. It's amazing. Go sign up for it. bravewidow.com/grief. Thanks, guys. Are you a widow who feels disconnected? Do you feel like you're stuck or even going backwards in your grief? Widowhood can be lonely and isolating, but it doesn't have to be. Join us in the Brave Widow membership community and connect. We teach widows how to find hope, heal their heart, and dream again for the future. Find your purpose and create a life you love today. Go to bravewidow.com to get started.